Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Metagame Book Club. This is our fifth week and final week. It's overview and conclusions. So we figured that since we'd start things off, we figured we'd start off with track one. Well, basically because track one comes before track two. So with this, we have our normal list of suspects, I should say, the usual suspects. So we have Jerry.
Hello.
We have Kay. We have Sherry yes, Sherry's here. You see her mostly from track one. We have Trish. We have Blue.
Hi guys.
And of course you have me again. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and have Sherry kick off the overview for week 5 for track one.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All right, so yes, incredibly enough, as I repeat myself, it is week 5. I can't believe we're at week 5. So what I plan to do with our track today is just give you an overview of what we have done from week 1 through week 4, specifically some of the optional text that we didn't get to cover. So Chris, if you can go ahead and go next. Yeah. So again, because of the time concern, because we're trying to get through both tracks and also talk about the virtual economy, I'm only going to address the most important, the most significant arguments in each of this article. Okay? So Chris, if you can go next for me again. Okay. So I've selected these 4 particular that we didn't get to cover, but they're quite important. The first one is called genre in the video game, and that is from Mark J.P. Wolf. The second one is called Adapting the Principles of Ludology to the Method of Video Game Content Analysis, and that's by Stephen Mallier. And that's first one's week 1. The second article's on week 2. Week 3, I'm going back to Stephen E. Jones's book, The Meaning of Video Games, and cover a little bit about Chapter 5 on the Wii platform. And the last article is from Industria, 10 Years of Radical Socio-Political Video Games by Chris Priestman. Okay, so if we can go next. All right, thank you. So in this article, keep in mind that this was published in 2000, but Mark J.P. Wolf attempts one of the first attempts on how to define game genres. And if you can remember back in week 1, we were trying to figure out certain definitions for what is play, what is game, and what is the magic circle. So I assigned this particular text to show you the next evolution to those definitions, which is what exactly is a game genre. So if we can go next. Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit of the historical background or nerd talk. Okay? Genus for class, kind, style, or sort. So it could mean any of those things. And the term first appeared in Aristotle's The Poetics, okay? And he lays out how to assess genre implicitly, but he uses tragedy and comedy to discuss objects of imitation. So what he means by imitation is that it imitates reality in a certain way, represents human nature. And scholar Clinton explains that, quote, Aristotle establishes genre in terms of both convention and historical observation, and define genre in terms of both convention and purpose. Okay, so genre is not just a box, but there is purpose and intention behind the creation of a genre. So here are some more modern definition of genre, because it's pretty old actually, and there's a big group of scholars working on this. So the first definition is that genre is a style formed by familiar conventional forms that are associated with a specific kind of text. We call that falling under one type of genre. Second definition is genre is a form of social action, and The idea that, for example, a web blog, according to Carolyn R. Miller, is a type of genre. And through a web blog, you can promote yourself. So that's what she means by social action. Okay? Third definition is genre is the ground for writing invention. So it's a structure by which writers invent. So invention requires some kind of constraint. So genres serve as those constraints to help writers figure out how to start writing according to certain conventions. Okay? So a genre's constituent elements can each be influential by external forces or ideas and can change form. So each individual form can change. Therefore, when we say something is under a certain genre, genre itself is always in flux. It's always changing when the forms themselves change, those constituent parts. Okay? So we can go next. Thank you. So then, really basic breakdown of what is genre for genre studies. So how does this apply to video game genres? So that actually video game genres are different from literary and film genres, okay? Since video games provide interactivity and call on the player audience to participate in the diegetic world of a game. So as a vocabulary review, diegetic refers to storytelling, telling of a story. And usually the telling, the oratory nature of the storytelling reveals the inner world of either the character or the narrative itself. So if a character is telling you what they're thinking inside, that would be a diegetic style narrative storytelling. Okay? And what further explains that, and here's a bigger quote. The game's objective is a motivational force for the player, and this, combined with the various forms of interactivity present in the game, are useful places to start in building a set of video game genres. The object of the game can be multiple or divided into steps, placing the game in more than one genre, just as the film's theme and iconography can place a film in multiple genres. So he gives the example, Blade Runner, the film, for example, fits both science fiction and hard-boiled detective genres. So he's careful to say, I'm going to try to establish certain genres based on those, the motivation behind that game, for example. But keep in mind that certain games, if they have elements from other genres, they can actually be classified under multiple genres. So they're not that static, okay? So if we can go next. Okay. That article that I referenced there has wonderful lists of genres, but I cannot cover everything, so what I did was select two of them as examples, okay? So I just want to emphasize that. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that's great, but, we can go back and make a table from that, which so that we can share it with our metagamers.
We do like tables.
Yeah, we make tables and spreadsheets all the time.
Okay, then go for it. Torture yourself and go for it.
And the other thing I was gonna say, I was just gonna remind people, if you recall, like a couple years back in, I think it was 2011, 2012, we had Mark J.P. Wolf as a keynote speaker for VWBPE. He was really great. He came into Second Life. It was his first time coming into Second Life, and he did really good. And he really did a kind of the history of narrative in virtual worlds for us. It was really great.
Right, and I selected his text because his text is considered one of the more comprehensive lists, where it tends to create a taxonomy of those game genres, right? So the actual classification. So yes, keep in mind it is from 2000. Okay, the text is a bit old, but in the text he also says, as new technology comes about, as new type of video games get developed, then obviously these genres might change name as future ones come. But I do want to show you guys how he decided to, so that we can understand how video games work. So just to emphasize, the constituent elements of the video game genre, such specific types of actions, objectives, purpose, sequences, scenarios help define it. So he's using those particular elements to say that's how I'm determining what genre a game falls under, okay, or what that genre is. A game can be categorized in multiple genres if it contains other genre elements. So the first one, I think most of us are familiar with adventure games. They're not as popular now, but back in the day, they were basically the thing, okay? The category is general enough that it encompasses all kinds of games like RPGs to text adventure. Sometimes people call those adventure games. But here's his definition, okay? He says, games which are set in a world usually made up of multiple connected rooms or screens, involving an objective which is more complex than simply catching, shooting, capturing, or escaping. And those four things that he just listed there, those are all individual genres if you look at his text, okay? Although completion of the objective may involve several or all of these, okay? So that's adventure. The second, select this one because I think in our last conversation with Blue was saying that Animal Crossing is a collecting game. So, and I agree with that. Now, Mark J.P. Wolf's definition of collecting is a little bit different back in the day, okay? So he says, collecting genre is games in which the primary objective involves the collecting of objects that do not move, okay? Such as Pac-Man or Mousetrap. Or the surrounding of areas such as Quicks or Evidar. Oh, go ahead.
Wait. So he wouldn't... Is he even... 2000, I mean, I know we had Pokemon, but, I mean, they were moving creatures with attacks. And that was really a collecting game. I mean, the slogan is, gotta catch them all, for heaven's sakes.
Right, but he calls it as a different type of game, actually. There's another genre just for those, which is moving. So he tried to differentiate. Yeah. So this is someone's categorization. Then you can say whether you want to agree with it or not. These categories can change. But anyway, for his definition, he says that the term should not be used for games in which objects or characters sought by the player character are in motion. Okay, anything that's moving. So for him, if we go by his 2000 definitions, probably Animal Crossing wouldn't be a collecting game simply because some of the things move. Right, Blue?
If we're talking about GameCube, I mean, they were pretty static. I mean, they were inanimate objects. But I mean, like, when you got into furniture pieces, then you had, like, dancing cactuses and TVs and radios that had little musical notes that popped off. So, I mean, it depends. Like, when you were fishing, when you were looking for, well, I guess insects were totally moving at that point. But, okay. Okay,
yeah,
I got you there.
Things.
Very few things.
Some things. Right. And dancing cactuses? These are dancing cactuses?
Well, it looked like a cactus with, like, with a cross between a fire hydrant. And they made noises. They're like, wah, wah.
Yeah. Sure, you might be getting to this later, but there's, for me, playing Animal Crossing, it was very much like a sim game, when they, like the Sims. So you have a little character that, builds up a house and furnishes it and builds up a town, and so there's that element to it as well.
Stop jumping ahead.
Sorry.
No, last week we covered all about. Blue was so excited about it.
Actually, it wasn't I was going to say it wasn't last week. It was Thursday.
Yeah, it was just a few days ago.
Okay, you're right. I don't know my time anymore. Thursday.
Disappears.
And I was going to say, Jerry, you probably would have really liked it because we talked about debt and mortgage and we talked about the propaganda of it all and
we were totally in Jerry's alley.
Ian Bo was talking about his 5-year-old learning about crushing debt and consumerism and the evils of it and things like that.
It's not propaganda, it's common wisdom.
It's visual rhetoric, thanks.
Oh, he might not like our discussion then.
I'll have to go back and watch it. I have to confess I haven't had a chance to watch it.
You have to put comments on the YouTube now.
Yeah.
You have to. And time.
So, I think I can go over. I just want to quickly address that the Wolf article is worth your time if you're interested to see how people formulate game genres and also what the modern definitions are. I do want to emphasize that Nintendo, since the creation of SMB1, Super Mario Bros. 1, has already figured out that genres, if you make a game that follows genre conventions too closely, it gets boring. And due to competition with other game companies, what they did was they started to cross genres. So modern game design actually cross multiple genres in its design. So it doesn't really fall that neatly under any type of genre. But when you look online, for example, a game site, they will try to, categorize. So genre becomes a branding or marketing tool. But in terms of looking at a game, most games don't fall so neatly under these genres that we're listing here.
Like Dead Space.
Okay? Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good one,
fiction,
too.
zombies, let's do this.
Yeah, that's a shooter, and then there's, there's shooter, and there's narrative, and there's adventure. I mean, multiple elements in that one, too. So, if we can go next. Okay. I just decided to throw this one in. Just to
It has a picture.
say, for example, this is Pac-Man in space. Okay, so someone basically did an exhibit, and they broadcast or projected Pac-Man on the wall to be played. Now, under the definition of collecting, I don't know if this shifts in congruence to his other genres. So this is something to think about. So when the video game medium is projected in other places or is presented in other forms, can we still put them neatly in these particular genres? That's something to think about. Okay? So if we can go next. Yeah. So I'm going to review another text, and this is from week 2, and where we discuss a nice debate between narrative and ludology. And the text is called Adapting the Principles of Ludology to the Method of Video Game Content Analysis. So you can see that there is a ludological bent to this article, like Malier's approach to applying those principles, okay, to his analysis. So if we could go next. Okay, so on qualitative video game content analysis, okay, so he is seeking to synthesize various video game study methods proposed by narratologists and ludologists. And I think, if you guys remember, I addressed that there are multiple positions, right, from both sides of the aisles, exactly how we should interpret video games. And some, narratologists say we really should look at the narrative elements because video games are telling stories. And the ludologists say, no, we really, fiction or narrative is really secondary to what a video game is supposed to do. We should look at the formalist quality of a video game, and that involves how the software is built, the mechanics, the rules, etc. Okay? So he references Gonzalo Fresca, who is one of the prominent ludologists, that most studies fail to address a game's formalist elements. So here's the quote, okay? It can be argued that these studies have investigated presentation, okay, so what's displayed on the screen, rather than elements of simulation, and consequently that a number of characteristics that are essential to the gameplay experience have. I like this article because he separated it out. Elements of representation versus elements of simulation. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you exactly what he means by that. So if we can go next. Okay, so I broke these down in convenience, but there is a chart in his article where he shows you exactly what he means by these. So I kind of broke it down to pieces here. So here's his scheme for analysis. This is what he proposes to do: proper qualitative video game analysis. Okay, so elements of representation area. Audio-visual style. So what that is you're going to analyze the graphical explicitness. So explicit is what you can see, what's apparent, okay? And the level of graphical detail in addition to the filmic atmosphere that is created, okay? So that's basically the visual analysis there. Number 2 is narration. So analyze action scenes that unfolds in the game and how the action scenes influence characters' behaviors. So we're looking at narrative elements. For him, that falls under representation. Now, elements of simulation, this is where it gets interesting. This is where the ludological study come into play. So one is the complexity of controls. So what he's asking for is that we should also analyze the mental and physical efforts that are required of a player in order to successfully and efficiently interact with the game program. So how does the control affect how the player experiences the game? Okay, next. Okay, and I think Jerry's telling us that we're lagging a bit, so I apologize if my voice is going in and out today. But the slides will be available later, okay? The second part, elements of simulation, it continues on. So there's 4 other elements, okay? Game goals. So game goals, there are 3 major types, okay, which are competitive play, explorative play, and narrative play. So depending on the goal of the game, we also experience the game in different ways. Changes for us. So we also need to take a look at those goals. Number 3 is character and object structure. So what he's asking is that the complexity of the system of the character and the objects, the object system, the ontology of the objects in the game, as well as the ideology that's hidden in the rewards a player is given, should also be examined. Okay, those also add meaning to a game. Number 4 is the balance between user input and pre-programmed rules. So in a sense, the easy way to think about it is how much freedom does a player have within the constraints of the game, and also can the player make certain decisions, even the actions in the game. How much freedom does one have? And number 5 is spatial properties of the game world. So you're basically looking at the geography of the game. Sometimes you can see a map mechanic that shows you the world, how expansive the world is, and realism of the game element. See, he laid out 7 criteria for analysis. So when we say, I'm about to conduct a game analysis, depending on the theorist and the method that you choose, it is really not that simple. There's a lot of elements to look for, and you can see very easily someone can write a very easy, 20, 30-page paper, maybe something on Pac-Man, if you're using these criteria to think about what Pac-Man means. Okay? So I think you can go next. Okay. Now I'm heading directly into week 3. Week 3 we covered the cultural and social dimensions of games, and the chapter that we didn't get to cover in the broadcast was on the Wii platform. That was chapter 5, and it's the book The Meaning of Video Games by Stephen E. Jones. So if we can go next to that slide. Okay, so here is the Wii universe. So some of us who play Wii, we recognize that there are Miis there. So Miis are your avatars that represent who you are. And there's the Wii control. And I didn't exactly put the Wiimote. I assume that most people know what the Wiimote is, but basically you use it, you fling it around, and you interact with the game that way. Okay? But they're just some examples what the Wii universe is composed of. So, so we can go next. All right. Okay. So here's the big one, platform studies. So far, we talked about analyzing the rhetoric of games. We talked about the visuals. We talk about mechanics and rules. But later, Bogos and Montford added another element which made this even more complex. They call it platform studies. So game studies is getting more and more complex each year. But anyway, platform studies. So Stephen E. Jones references Montfort and Bogo's argument about platform and his explanation of the Wii platform. Okay, so here's a quote. The Wii has rejected sheer power and its affordances, such as realistic, high-definition graphics and the ability to play DVDs in order to be smart and fast. The fittest rather than the most ferocious dinosaur, and thus to survive in a place, the family niche to which it is uniquely adapted, set apart from the main competition between Microsoft and Sony. So, unlike Microsoft and Sony, Wii has always been very family-oriented, okay? The way they design their platform, the way they design the controller, as well as the software, always keep the family in mind, okay? The Wii simple white box is both a symbolic representation and the literal embodiment of this targeted adaptation model. So they're referring to the family again. So, for example, the Wii is smaller, roughly 6-inch by 8.5-inch by 1.7-inch, as opposed to the roughly 10-inch by 12-inch by 3-inch for the Xbox and PS3. So I think you guys, if you own those multiple systems, you'll notice that Xbox and PS3 is larger, but Wii intentionally makes itself much smaller to make it cuter looking. What its marketing has referred to as the size of 3 DVD cases and lighter. Okay, so it's smaller. There's intention even behind the design of a platform. Okay, so if we can go next. Okay, and because of our lag, if you guys want to jump in, please just interrupt me because you know the lag. I'm not really sure if you're asking questions or not. But anyway,
just a quick observation too. You know, the Wii isn't, you know, I think what most gamers would consider a power console, right? And I appreciate what you're saying about it kind of going for a particular niche in terms of gamer or user. You know, the other part about it too, though, that I think as you're talking about this is really really helpful in thinking about a system like the Wii, is that because it is trying to focus on a particular kind of user, I think they've become a lot more creative in terms of thinking about different ways of making the system and the games more accessible from the interface standpoint. And that was the thing that really kind of excited me about the Wii. You know, it wasn't the power, obviously, but just that they were willing to branch out away from the keyboard and the mouse and actually start to, I don't know if you call it embodiment, but actually pulling the rest of the player physically into the experience of interacting with the game, right? So it's not just your keyboard finger, your mouse hand going. So that's the other thing I really like. I was really impressed by looking at this from a big picture standpoint, is sort of the evolution that change represents in terms of, you know, the different ways of interfacing with the game that make it much more immersive in a way, because you're really kind of physically having to embody or interact on a more full body level in a game experience.
Wonderful comments, Jerry. I think, you know, what you're discussing there, what you're revealing is that the way the platform is designed also affect our physical relationship with the influence the way we can interact with it. So the design, now we're thinking about how the design can actually affect us further. So that's a really great comment there. Okay, that's perfect. So that adds to what I'm discussing here, actually. So I'm going to talk platform design of the NES, okay? So Stephen E. Jones further discusses Nintendo's software culture that is closely tied to its hardware platforms. Game software becomes the family branding for the hardware. So the software also ties to the hardware. In fact, that Nintendo intentionally package the hardware and the software together, unlike Sony and Microsoft. This is important too. So here's a quote. Super Mario Bros. Was released for the NES and was closely associated of that system and lent its own aura to the system in turn, in a kind of symbiotic development loop. Kohler argues that Super Mario Brothers was a breakthrough in 1985 in terms of.
We're getting a little bit of lag on you, Sherry. I think the last thing we heard was Super Mario Brothers being the innovation in 1985.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we're getting you back, but
Let's
it's
go
all
back
up in
now.
the slide.
So I apologize. I don't know if it would be helpful if I jump in and out of the Hangout, but I'm going to continue until it kicks me out, maybe.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, so definitely see the slides afterwards, and if not, I might jump out. But anyway, what I was saying there was that there is that symbiotic relationship between hardware and software. I think for some of us who have Nintendo, multiple versions of the Nintendo platforms, I think you remember also what we were really looking forward to is the Super Mario Brothers games that are released, each version as a Super Mario Brothers. In fact, when they advertise the platform, they always say, this is the version of the new Super Mario Brothers, which enhances features that can be played on this platform. So we're always looking forward to certain titles like Zelda and SMB. In those particular software also is in step with the evolutionary development of the hardware, so they are symbiotic in that sense. And yes, Mario Kart as well. And Jerry, you want to talk about Mario Kart a bit?
Oh yeah, I mean it was one of the classic games in the Mario lines that go back. But once the Wii came out, the interface changed. So instead of kind of buttons or you had an actual steering wheel that you can then start to play on. And for PC games and simulations, that wasn't a big thing. Those kinds of things have been there before, especially if you're a high-end simulation gamer. But to have that come out in a more affordable sort of consumer level console is really cool. And I think it for me anyways, it made the game a lot more fun because a lot more people found it accessible, right? Anyways.
Right. So if you're not whatever hardcore gamer actually means, Nintendo always kind of invited everyone to kind of join in, whether or not you're really, really good at games or not, right? So I think that's an inviting element. So when we think Nintendo, we think inviting rather than competition, I think. That's kind of nice.
Well, it made the game experience for that game in particular a lot more fun because then you had a lot more people that you could, over the network, you could set up like a tournament, a race, right? So you could have friends from all over come on board, and it just made that piece a lot easier. And that was a part of what made it so fun, that evolution.
Right. And Trish, did you want to add a few notes? Or
I was thinking about my daughters played how their games were cross-platform because Super Mario Brothers, you could play it on your Game Boy or you could play it on the Wii, and how they even you could get whenever they came out with the new Game Boys, like the Game Boy Advance or the Game Boy 3DS, you could get the Super Mario edition, or you could get one that was a Koopa Troopa or somebody like that. They would have favorite characters on the Game Boy so that you could be identified with your favorite Super Mario Brother character, and how they sort of tied them all in together so you could do well on your Game Boy and then you could come home and play it on the Wii.
Yes. There's that continuity in the NES systems that we're missing from the other platforms. And they use those characters, those software characters, to kind of connect their family of platforms together. So perfect example. Perfect. And if we can go next. All right, just to emphasize, okay? So I want to emphasize that the meaning that we infer from a game. So when we're playing, we infer certain meanings from it. That meaning is contributed by several layers. Game's software design. The second is the game's platform's hardware design. And the third layer is that game design, which also consider mechanics and rules, right? And sometimes whether or not to incorporate a narrative into that. All through various designers' socio-cultural lenses. So we also need to consider that when a designer is designing, they bring their own lenses to the design, okay? Whether it's explicit or implicit, okay? So those are the things we have to consider. So Jones references Monfort and Bogle's argument on the meaning of platforms. So they argue that a platform is a perspective, an abstraction, a way of conceptualizing a system for delivering a video game to the game player. In this sense, any platform is a virtual console, a cultural construct as much as a hardware. So they're getting deeper here. It's pretty deep if you consider the fact that even a platform itself speaks a culture, right? So when we think Nintendo, Trish helped out and Jerry helped out, and before Blue had to exit for a second. But no, that's okay. No. Laggy today. So anyway, what you guys contributed is this, right? There are certain values that we associate with Nintendo because of the way they deliver the software, because of the way they, associate certain game characters with certain platforms, and also that there's a cross-platform capability between those games. We associate certain values with Nintendo. We like Nintendo, essentially, okay? So Miyamoto, okay, the great, big kahuna at Nintendo, has also said that the Wii was designed to overthrow the stereotype of the antisocial video game player. Again, the goal was not technological but cultural. So you see, we think of technology as this efficient system, but the truth is, people who are designing the technology incorporate their values. So now we're thinking later. So if you say, I'm going to do game studies, it's a game now. It's not enough just talking about software capabilities and just looking at the hardware, but also social and cultural elements that's folded into the game through all those various lenses. Okay?
But Sherry, as you're saying that, that's one of the things, as I take a step back and kind of reconsider the games I have, the experience with Wii, that was the other thing that really stands out, is that a lot more of their games are what I would consider more kind of group, collaborative, let's play along kind of games. So, Animal Crossing could be that way. You could hook up your towns, right, and kind of visit with one another. Mario Kart, same thing. We could all get together. We could have a race. So even though in some cases like Mario Kart, it might be competitive, it was much more sort of, well, it's kind of fun competition. It's, in the way that it was approached. It just felt that way. And very, very different from, I don't know, Call of Duty. So even though there was this competitive element to some of the games, it didn't have that same sort of hyper-competitive, aggressive edge to the feel of it, that some of the other console systems seem to. It just, something that it maybe kind of reflect on some in what you're saying, kind of the feel, the cultural feel, the social feel of the game with Nintendo.
Right. And I think Trish also added that I think AC Animal Crossing, right, is going to be multiplayer. So they're also going. Yeah, go ahead. Please.
That's not Animal Crossing. That's the latest Assassin's Creed, the one that's coming out.
Assassin's Creed Unity.
Yeah, you're going to be able to have multiplayer in Assassin's Creed, and that's going to be the first time you're ever going to be able to do that. And that's the Assassin's Creed that's coming out later this year.
I will say with Animal Crossing, I mean, even from the very first one, you were able to play with other people. Like, you were able to visit other people's towns. When the Wii U technology came out, they were able to set up a camera and you could talk with someone and still be in the towns and exchanging that kind of social interactions. So it is kind of multiplayer.
Right. So I hope that this chapter, I'm really doing a hard sell here with Stephen E. Jones, but that book, with the limited time we have, I really cannot cover the richness of the book. And obviously, I would like you to purchase the book. It's a really good book to read, and it forces you to think about things in layers. So when we talk about meaning, it is not so simple as here's a literary tool, go figure it out. It is really forcing, if you're teaching game studies to students, you're basically teaching them to think about reality in layers. Another layer upon another layer of reality that all contribute to our understanding of our present, right?
Well, yeah, I think the theory for me. I mean, not even being familiar with any of the theories that you're presenting, but hearing from them hearing of them from you. I mean, it gives me a framework then for deconstructing a game. So instead of just well, here's the game experience of me as a gamer, kind of interfacing with it, so this is what I'm coming away. It's giving me kind of a lens or a framework through which I can then be more analytical, or it tells me, okay, well, there's like you're saying, several layers that are here that you can explore, and allows you to kind of deconstruct and think about those different elements of what I'm experiencing a lot more thoroughly, and it makes it a lot more interesting on that level too. So.
We brought in deconstruction. I'm sure some people are wild about that. Derrida. Never brought in Derrida, but yes, deconstruction is very apropos to what we're discussing. Now, I'm going to move next, so because of the time All right. Okay. So the last week, which was Thursday actually, was on the construct of the real and the rhetoric of games. So this is probably the hardest week of all the weeks that we've discussed before, at least in my consideration. And one of the article that I believe that Kay wanted to address that we didn't get to discuss in the last broadcast was Malay Industria, 10 Years of Radical Socio-Political Video Games. And this was an interview done with Pedercini, Federico Pedercini, in 2013 by Chris Priestman. So we're going to go next and show you what the interview was about. Okay, so Paolo Pedercini, he's currently a professor of experimental game design at Carnegie Mellon University School of Art. And he's also known, before he took the position, he was already a distinguished artist and a political activist. In fact, he got himself into a lot of trouble because he's not afraid to say what activist. So he expresses political critiques and leftist ideologies via the medium of video games, all personally created and published under his moniker, Malay Industria. So you will find, if you search for Malay Industrial, you will find his site. Game on there, but he actually is Malay Industria. He personally created all those games. So Malay Industria games daringly address and challenges a wide range of polemical real-world issues such as religion, sex and gender, terrorism, capitalism, and copyright laws. And in his interview with Chris Priestman, Paolo Pedercini reveals his intention for expressing via the game medium. So we're going to go next. Okay. So he discusses this. Oh, and does someone want to address?
Oh, well, yeah. What I guess I wanted to say was I wanted to say that his stuff, depending on exactly where you've been in academics, you may or may not be able to use his work.
Good point. Yeah, if you are, let's say if you are in K-12, maybe 1 or 2 titles is appropriate, but as a teacher you really need to filter some of it out. Especially I kind of gave you guys a hint that he also makes games about sex and gender, or challenging our perception of what sex is and what gender is. Those particular ones probably are really not appropriate for K-12 students, but for college students, we expect that they're adult enough to be able to handle it. Okay, so yeah, good add-on there. Anyhow, on the games and simulation for sense making. So sense making is a very big idea, big point for him about video games. So he says, I want to see games and simulations being used to make sense of the world around us. I want to see them next to text or moving images and not in an ancillary role. Okay, so it should be in the forefront. I want to see more journalism, more philosophy, more history, education, more experimental geography, conceived native media. So he's suggesting that games and simulation actually help us sense make, meaning understand, make sense of the world around us. So they have that particular property. So I'm going to go next and explain more on what he means here. Okay, so this is what he's saying here. That game design is essentially creating myths. Okay, so here's what he said. Interactive media come with an exceptional bias toward ambiguity. You can't quite make a clear argument as you would with plain text or speech. So let me explain this a little bit, okay? On Thursday, when we discussed the rhetoric of games, the traditional classic rhetoric studies is studying the linguistic text and how the linguistic text make arguments. Right? So you have the pro and con, you have refutation, you have rebuttal, you have proof, you have Lawrence argument. You can easily point those out in a linguistic text. But what he is saying here, the nature of video games and interactive media, most of them are visual or auditory based, is very hard to figure out the arguments because the argument in itself is harder to decipher and there's ambiguity. But he is going to say that that's a good thing, that it's ambiguous, okay? So further he says, people play and interact in different ways and tend to apply their pre-existing mental models to interpret what happened and why, something that in computer games isn't always explicit. Intentionally or not, game designers create a constellation of meanings and allow players to explore it. If you are a critical gamer, you may try to test the limits of this constellation, find out what worlds are possible forbidden. You may want to map these design choices against your own understanding of real-world systems. You may realize, for example, that all the cities allowed by SimCity are essentially manifestations of the same urbanist idea or myth. Okay? So he just gives you that example of SimCity as an example of it seems innocuous, it seems innocent, but really it's promoting a certain type of ideology, and that ideology is a myth in terms of what reality really represents. Okay? Oh no.
Well, I would say in SimCity, the loss of reality is that I'm the mayor and I can control natural disasters, and I can destroy towns. They should vote for me.
Yes. And there's unlimited resources and money, right?
I suppose.
Oh no, we lost Jerry, so maybe he'll join us later. Oh, yeah, I know. He would love this section here. I think
he always leaves on sections he'd love.
Yeah. Go. Okay. So the next section is on designing critical play. And he's going to say, in terms of critical play, he's going to argue that game designers has a specific role to play, that they should strive to create games that promote critical play. Okay? So he says here, I think the role of designer is to foster this type of critical play. That from, for example, BioShock's approach to politics and history. Ken Levine, and he's talking about BioShock 3. Ken Levine created BioShock 3. Okay? So Ken Levine claims that the BioShock titles work as Rorschach tests. Okay? Since some players see them as love letters to objectivism, while others as attacks to Tea Party or Occupy Wall Street movements. This ambiguity is built in and intentional. It's a way to with a sense of importance. the idea of dealing with serious and complex issues while cowardly withdrawing from any position or judgment. So he is obviously critiquing Ken Levine. Yeah, he is going to talk about ideology that's present. He said nothing is that innocent, even if he says it's not, okay? Or as Levine says, these games are about not buying into any of these extreme ideas. Well, guess what? That's also an ideology. That's liberalism. And it's about putting patches here and there while keeping things as they are. So Ken Levine says, when we designed this game, we put in the ideologies to let you see the consequences of following these ideologies. But I think that Pedercini has a great criticism to this, which is he says, wait a second, the fact that you're saying that you don't have to follow those ideology is also ideology. Okay, in that in itself, when you say don't follow that, that's liberalism. Escape from ideology. This idea that you can escape from it is for him, oversimplification of the issue. Okay, so I think, we can go next. Okay, so this is just a quick example, and I think if you guys look at week 4 of our game studies track, you should have seen that this game was available. It's Every Day the Same Dream, and the link is also available, so if you haven't had a chance to play it, you definitely want to try to give that game a shot. But that's a perfect example. In fact, just to add on to what Kay was saying, Every Day the Same Dream will be one of the games that you can assign to K-12 students. Okay, so I highly recommend this one.
Oh, yeah.
There's not much. Yeah. Can you think of anything else, Kay?
Yeah,
that's appropriate?
I know. Oh, well, actually, it's one that I use, and Chris has also used in agribusiness classes. We like the McDonald game. We really like the McDonald game. And when our students played it, the first reaction was, wait a minute, we can bankrupt the company. And they were, okay, the students we had were very used to seeing, the textbook publisher kind of attempts at a bit of simulation in gaming. And when they played in the McDonald game, it was very distinctive from what the textbook publishers were coming up with. The fact that they could bankrupt, totally lose. It wasn't just okay, try again and look at these formulas. It was, they could totally mess up. And the McDonald game also, it takes you from destroying the rainforest to having to deal with, underpaying your employees and then marketing fast food and to people who maybe shouldn't be eating fast food. So it was really wonderful. And the students we taught were actually agribusiness students. So not many of their agricultural economics classes or other agribusiness classes take a different point of view. Most of their classes are taught by people who are very invested in the agricultural industry. And so this was a great viewpoint. And Chris and I were actually on one of the discussion boards, I think it was the Games Network, and where we suggested somebody use this. And then somebody, I think it was from the Beef Association, like their marketing manager or communication manager, came out and basically told us that it was a terrible way to teach agribusiness. And so this went on the discussion forums for a bit. And I'll turn the mic over to Chris if she'd like to comment as well.
Well,
well,
you know that. Oh yeah, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say is that it was an interesting way, and we did give the students a disclaimer about it that there were some exaggerations that were there. We didn't list all the inaccuracies because it was kind of up to them to figure it out. So it was interesting about this was a different perspective to agribusiness and the mass farming, the large scale farming of livestock and handling of stuff and how you deal with economies of scale and a globalized business. So they had to play with all different 4 actors. They had to work with customer service. They had to they had to deal with the board of directors who were stereotypically saying, it's all about the profit, it's all about the money, it's all about the money, and so you had to balance that with production and your processing facility. So it was interesting that they got to see the whole, different pieces that come with, basically going ahead and being part of a very large business, where you are responsible for going ahead and overseeing it once you get into the executive role. So it was interesting from that perspective. And the other thing about it is that you had the ability to pause. Otherwise, the game would spin out of control because it was so fast, because time was accelerated in the game. So what happened is that a lot of students didn't realize they could pause the game, because literally you had to pause the game, adjust factors on the 4 different areas, and then restart the game. And so eventually what happens, everyone kept bankrupting the game in 30 seconds, because they would never pause the game. So they would try to fix one thing, and while they're trying to fix one thing, everything else was going crazy. They try to satisfy the workers, and then all of a sudden, now they're not getting their crops anymore in the developing countries, or now their livestock's having problems, or now you're having all these different problems. So then you go try to fix that, and you try putting out all these little fires. So without hitting the pause button, it was very, very hard for them to be successful in the game. But if you did use the pause button, you could pretty much run the game, forever. It's just that you had to make several ethical dilemmas. You had to face your ethics and the morality of it all. And so, the McDonald's game is a very fun game. But yeah, you have to let people know it is biased. There are biases there. What I always said was that, hey, this game is biased, but I'll let you figure out which slant it takes.
Well, exactly. I think that's a good point, because there's bias always. There's bias in the way that we do things now. So when we're talking about, games being products of a particular culture that's embedded, right? It's not just the technology, but it's also the rules that are presented, the kind of storyline, the kind of gameplay experience you're allowed to have or not allowed to have, what's emphasized or not. The bias is always there. And so I think that's an important thing. We're talking about game studies is something I'm really starting to appreciate. And again, I kind of look at it as a tool for deconstruction, is to say, okay, well, let's stop for a moment, in the way that we're looking at, paintings or novels or other types of art, that, well, it's not just, oh, look, there's a pretty experience to be had here. There's also something being said, something being expressed, and usually it's coming from a particular culture or worldview. So, games like that, I think, kind of forcing people to kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, what is being presented here? What's being argued here? As far as perspective, and does that make sense, right? And let's examine that and kind of turn it around and look at it from the different directions, because I think normally we're I think it may be part of our natural process to assume that what's around us always is just sort of there. It's taken for granted. It's sort of natural. Of course, this is the way to do things. But I think kind of approaching games and other things in this way forces us to kind of take a step back and say, well, what are some of the things that we're assuming, and does that apply everywhere? Always. So I think that's a very powerful kind of tool to have when you're talking about not just approaching games but art and other things.
Totally agree with you. And just as a plug for the last on Thursday, our Week 4 discussion, when we talk about the rhetoric of games, I went into a deep discussion on what exactly is classic rhetoric, and then the current rhetoric that's taking hold is called procedural rhetoric by Bogos, which exactly details what you're talking about, which is exactly how do we figure out how video games make arguments. And one of his big claim is that because games are governed by rules, programming rules, computational rules, that if we examine those rules and lay out those rules and make them explicit, then we can actually figure out what kind of claims, what kind of argument that video game is trying to make. So if you have not seen Week 4's video lecture, and we don't have a bad as this one, definitely watch that video to understand the methodology that I laid out for you. But I think I am done here.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I was going to say, Actually, I thought not so done. I think that if there's the biggest takeaway for educators when it comes to this book club, and hopefully other book clubs, is that there's a lot of meaning that goes into games. There's a lot of things that can be taught through games. There's a lot of interpretation. There's ways to look at it. If you want, there's ways to align it to the curriculum. It's critical thinking. It's computational thinking. It's all of this, right? And educators who just say, oh, well, I just let the kids go and play and they come back and they create something beautiful, wonderful or beautiful, or look what they made, and they're in awe. It's great to be in awe and appreciate what the students are doing, but at the same point in time, educating yourself about the richness in games and how you can actually teach and learn in games will make it so you are able to do much more than just be in awe of what a student can build in Minecraft. Knowing that these kind of interpretations, knowing how computational thinking can happen in there, knowing about game design, or ludology or narratology, this can be part of your toolkit when it comes to educating. It isn't that you just have to step back and see what a beautiful job they're doing. You can actually use this as a tool rather than just admire it from afar.
Right on. Okay. Very, very well said. And I just want to say, the whole drive about maker movement, and some people follow maker movement with making games, right? So some people take it to that direction. I think it's important. That movement is important, but I do have to preface this by saying, making students just make something without making them play games, that's an element that educators should emphasize too. You should let the students play certain games that are meaningful, help them dissect it so that they are more informed with what they are trying to do when they design. Because design is not a blind thing, it's not just a blind miracle that happens, but there are lots of intention and purpose behind your thinking before you design something. I'm going to stop there and hand the baton to Chris for track 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Awesome job. So now, I guess I almost want to sit there like, we should have like the little intermission slide, like let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to So you've had track 1. Now we're going to track 2 for the win with Cory Doctorow. So an overview, really quick. Is Blue will talk about several pieces as is normal, and then we'll chime in as needed, and then we'll also talk about some of the economic implications of the presentation. And good timing, great job, great timing, Blue.
Google just wants to screw with me today, but that's.
So first of all, congratulations, everyone! Woohoo! You've reached the end of the book.
Really great job. It was Thank you. So it was quite an accomplishment going through this book, going through the book club. Like, it's not just for completing the book, but like for coming through the whole book club. And like if you did track 1 or track 2, or if you did both of them, really great job. This is hopefully we're gonna try and start this up again. So we'll discuss it later, but really good job. So on to the next slide. So we have our character reflections. So this is different from our character studies and cultural studies we're doing, because we're doing, it's not really like an overview or wrap up. I'm not going to go through over the past weeks, but I'm going to include elements from the past weeks so that we can try and incorporate those things. But so our character reflections, how far have they come? I'm really going to stick with the main 3 characters, because if I did this for all the characters, we'd be here till 5 o'clock. So, Volo, do you go to the next one? So if you guys remember this is from week 3 when we were talking about narration. This is our talking about what defines a round character and a flat character. These are our dynamic and static characters. The people who are the main characters versus the people who are just in the background or helping support and be foils to our main characters. So they've gone through a whole lot. This is talking about their journey as individuals and how they've progressed throughout the book from beginning to end. And I mean, they've gone through a lot of changes, especially Wei Dong. He's probably the one I'm going to talk about the most, but we'll get to him. So next. So this is a representation for Matthew. If you guys look in the past videos, I've assigned colors to all the characters. So he has a dark blue, but starting him out from the beginning, he was probably one of the first people to walk out of that particular gold farming factory in Shenzhen from Boss Wing. He was very intelligent. He was really being underappreciated, and he was like, I'm leaving, I'm going to form my own thing, I have my own computers. And I mean, he was doing a very good job until he got beat up that first time. I mean, but you know what? He didn't just fall. He didn't settle for less. He kept going. Even though he was beat up, even though he was being completely faulted upon, he strived to continue. And I mean, he gathered his guilty buddies, and you know, he made a ton of money the next time around. But now I think the timeline for the book is that this is happening over a couple of months. This isn't like over a couple of years. This is happening within a good couple of months, maybe like 5 to 7 months. So in this time, after he was making bank, after he made, I'll put the quote-unquote deal with Boss Wing that he'd run a separate branch in which he'd have to give 60% of his earnings to him, which is still very unfair. So then they formed the strike, thanks to Big Sister No and the IWWWW. And during the strike, the police came. They threw gas pellets. He was beat upon with a baton, and they picked him up, and he was in jail. He was really in jail for, I believe the book specifies 3 months, but he was hardcore. This kid, I mean, I think they kept him at about, he was under the age of 20 for Matthew, but he was in jail, in hardcore jail with people who were killing. Well, they throw anybody in jail in China. I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. They don't really need a reason. But and thanks to Lu and G, they were able to bring him out. Well, thanks to her supporters, they were able to get the right connections. They were able to get Matthew out, claiming that he was there under false pretenses, which was really nice. But very shortly after of meeting G, starting back up with the Webleys, and then really trying to get situated with this normal life again. Well, I say normal, but he's on the run from the authorities. He's hiding. He's ducking police. But then this really big thing happened with him. The night when after the first week of the strike, during the second one, there was this massive raid, and lots of bad stuff happened. I'm actually getting emotional about it because it was a very powerful moment in the book. Like when Matthew's talking about this, we hear his perspective after what's happened, because during this particular chapter it starts with G and Wei Dong really in the midst of it, and this is where Lu/Tink dies, and we later find out that Matthew was there. He was in a different building, but he got out much faster, and he was able to hide up on the rooftops. And he took his phone out and he was recording it, and he was seeing his friends die, people that he knew, his friends, being piled up with bodies, and it was very. Seeing that kind of thing happen will definitely has changed his life for sure. But he knows that he really must continue his mission, but now he has to still duck the police. That last bullet there was Shenzhen Navigator, and this is for a good period of the time he gets separated from the Webleys, and he's really trying to get to like a safe place. I know the Mighty Crank keeps sending him places to go, so he's really trying to duck the police. The police have begun like barricading and closing off streets and highways and different alleyways in Shenzhen, so he has to get out of Shenzhen. So using lots of different techniques to get out of there, using lots of different secret alleyways. He secretly enlists the help of some random tourists that he claims to be a very good tour guide, and he helps them to get out, while at the same time he gets out, which is beneficial to him. But he just, from that point, he's not really in the rest of the book, but he manages to meet up with everybody after he's ducking the police like crazy. So, I mean, he's gone from really he's had lots of low points, and I mean, it's just, if we were doing his action graph, I mean, it'd be like down here below that normal line of happiness. And I mean, I think he's still trying to get used to everything because, I mean, watching his friends die, it's going to take a while to recover from that. So, yes, please move on to the next one. So, this is Mala. Mala has been this fuchsia pink color, because I didn't want to be super feminist with a bubblegum pink, but because Mala's more of a strong girl, she wants to retain her femininity, but at the same time she needs to be general about Walla. So, really with her story, I mean, you could have just done an entire novel with her being this village girl, like from the Davari, and then becoming this very upstanding, like, general person taking over and being like, those types of stories exist, and it only within a couple of paragraphs they did that, which was very impressive. I must commend Cory Doctorow for that impressive, because we could have spent a whole chapter on her just becoming who she is. But she finally she gets a job from Mr. I forget his name. Sorry, but she gets a job doing what she does. It was just a hobby. She was playing the zombie mech game, and she's just very good at it. And so she gets a job as it. During one particular incident, she stays behind when she's talking with thank you, Mr. Banerjee. And one instance, she stays behind because Big Sister No is talking to her because she's trying to unite the Gold Farmers. And this is a very beginning ideal for her. She doesn't want to commit to anything, and she's like, just stay away from me. But at the same time, she you can see that she's really thinking about it. And so she stays out late, probably past midnight. All of her army has left, and so it's just her. And when she's in Mrs. Doda's cafe, she has a nephew, and he's being described as this very disgruntled, bully type person who is into chewing tobacco. And one of the points that came up was called Eve teasing, where even without any provocation, a guy would just pretty much totally hit and go on to a girl. And this is very popular within India from the research that we did. And so as she's walking home, the nephew is following her and trying to get her, but she's having no part of it. She's like, I am a general. So she totally takes command. She leaps out, kicks him down, and this feeling of power. She feels like she's in control. She knows what she's doing, but at the same time, after a few minutes, she's like, oh, something really bad happened. And it finally occurs to her that she might have done something wrong. So she's running home now, and she meets with her mom. She's crying. Her mom's very upset that this happened. But she didn't want anything to happen to her. But I mean, at the same time, I think for the conflict with her mother was that she wanted her to be safe, but at the same time, she didn't. They were very consistent with the money that was coming in, and this might change that because the job that Mala had was working in the cafe, so they would change it now based on that dynamic. So she gets a call from Mr. Banerjee, and they talked about the nephew, and he's like, fine, I'll have to take money out of there. But at the same time, it's saying that I'm deducting from your money, but I'm allowing you to keep the majority of what you have. But it's essentially really blackmailing. And it's really awful. She doesn't want anybody to know about it. I mean, the only people who know about it are Mala, whole family, Yasmin and some of her higher ups in her army. I don't think everybody in the army knows. She wouldn't tell everybody. But in any case, because of this now pushed relationship from Mr. Banerjee to she needs to excel, she needs to work overtime to pay off the debt of she has to pay back whatever amount she did to send the nephew to the hospital, which she broke a couple of ribs and lots of crazy stuff. But during this development, within like a month or two, Yasmin is getting the talks with Big Sister No about joining the Webleys because she's more in tune to it. And she's like, but look at what we're doing. And she tries to convince Mala at one point. And she's like, if you're my sister, you'll understand. But then Mala's really not having anything to do with it. And she's like, I can't lose my job. I'm sorry. I really have to stick with this. Or people are going to find out about what I did to the nephew. So she has to break that relationship. Mala's pretty heartbroken about it too, but we really get it in that chapter. It's based on Yasmin's perspective, and she's very heartbroken, and she's very upset. But when we get later into it, Mala says that she was very sorry for it, that what happened, and it was a confession that it was Mr. Banerjee that was pushing her to attack her at one point, because I guess Mr. Banerjee found out that Yasmin was participating in the Webleys' activities, and Mr. Banerjee was getting the heat from his employers about trying to stop the unification of the gold farmers. But Mala is starting to really subside now. She really is losing that general mentality. Well, she maintains it, but I mean she's looking more into what it is she's causing. She's looking at the cause and effects now, and after one particular fight, Mr. Banerjee is sending children to attack them, and during this battle, two children are seriously injured. One of them dies, and that becomes a emotional conflict for both Mala and Yasmin. So this is the village where they change. Like, we need to be more peaceful. We need to stop fighting. Fighting is not the answer that we're doing. And so, I mean, she's now becoming this very aggressive, I have to stand my ground, to a different kind of standing my ground. Instead of being super aggressive, it's more of this passive aggressive. And she takes on that, they mentioned the India mentality of of Gandhi and how peaceful he was. But at the same time, it's trying to, do what's right. And yeah, no, Mala is from India. She's lived in Davari. So yeah, she is Indian, Jerry. So the last bit is she was kidnapped and in mortal danger, and we're kind of left on a thread whether we know or not if she's going to survive. But we leave her in a hospital. She's mortally wounded, and Yasmin and Ashok are completely are rocked to the cause about this. I mean, she's in casts. She's lucky to even be awake to look at them, let alone try and speak. So it's, I mean, I think her real, like, she was going from the timid village Davari girl to being general about Walla, but then going from that fierce aggressor to a more passive aggression, like, stop, I'm not going to hurt you, but you need to listen type deal. And that was her real progression, her dynamic character development. So, so please, anyone come in and talk if they want to. I feel like I'm just everything. But if no one wants to say anything about Mala, we can move on to the next slide.
Well, I will say, Mala had so much suppressed anger because of the whole situation with Mr. Banerjee. After standing up for herself and keeping herself from being raped or worse, she stood up, and what does she get for it? She gets blackmailed by Banerjee, and she has to leave the place that she really likes, and she has to kind of turn on her friends because in order to keep him quiet and keep her family fed, she's going to have to go along with his evil scheme. And that anger just keeps building till she's getting ready to throw a Molotov cocktail, and Yasmin breaks her leg. and it was like that jarred her back. And from that point on, you see her working with Ashok, and he's teaching her about the economics behind what she's doing and what they're all about, so that she truly understands, and you start seeing a softer side of Mala, one that is not always the general robot Mala, but the girl. And even when they confronted those guys who had taken over Miss Dota's cafe, she was firm, but she wasn't angry anymore. She was more just, okay, you're not going to do this. It did take a really nasty turn, but the fact that at that moment all the support came in from all those union people that had originally met with Ashok and Yasmin and really stood up to the evilness of Banerjee, that was a really nice scene. That was one of the scenes where you were kind of going, yay, because for once you were seeing evil not triumph. So, and then the fact that once again he came back out like a specter and took her away, and she ended up in the hospital. That was one of the reasons I really would have liked to have known what happened with Mala. Where did she go from there? Did she make it out of Dharavi? Did Yasmin make it out of Dharavi? Did these relationships that had been built all through the book, did they continue from that point? I mean, to me, there were just lots of little dangling things.
We'll get a chance to discuss the not closed loose ends about the ending. So hold on to that for me, Trish. But no, you brought up some really good points. That when the union people came in, I mean, she was very impressed. She was like, fine, go ahead and hit me. Go ahead and do it in front of these people. Like, she had the neighbors and the buildings had people staring out, looking at him, and no one was really doing anything, and then the union people came. And I think she was very impressed that happened. And, I mean, I don't remember if she was brought to tears, but I think she, like, had, like, a grander appreciation and, like, this is what we're doing. Leave us alone type deal. And she was very firm about that. But, I mean, for the remainder of the whole chapters when she was speaking, I mean, it was always about the young boy that was killed when Mr. Banerjee was sending people after her. And then
well,
just to have her
one of the
kidnapped.
things that when both of you are talking about this, it's occurring to me. I think that's a general thing that seems to be running throughout the book for all the characters. It's a general, maybe not theme, but a dynamic, but this kind of conflict between the ability to recognize and act on sort of a mutual empathy or mutual humanity at odds with this other thing that pulls the characters in a different direction. And for Mala, it was very stark. It's like, okay, well, do you want to hold on to this good thing that you've got, the power, the benefits that come with that? Well, if you want that, then you end up holding a Molotov cocktail ready to throw it at the person that you'd grown up with, right? And it seemed like at that point that was a turning point for her. But it seemed like that seems to be an underlying theme, that particular struggle of that kind of human connection at odds with the game, the economic game that's being put out there. So as you're both talking about this, I mean, that seems to be something that's kind of coming out.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of, they've been playing video games. We're talking about kids. The characters in this book are like 20 and younger. We're talking about kids who are going in and they're gold farming or they're doing whatever they're doing. They're playing the game. And people are dying. I mean, we're not talking about somebody dying in game. We're talking about real people dying because of a video game. And those thoughts have to be going on in their head of, wait, what is this? And in fact, when the boy was killed in the village, Ashok, he is the son of a doctor. And you could hear in his character this thing going on in his head. He was like, how did me, a doctor's kid, and I'm an economist. I write numbers on paper. What am I doing here with this child who I think was 8 or 9 years old, who's laying there dying and he's bleeding to death? And you know, the oppositeness of the whole situation of how people in power refuse to let go of the power, and they will do what is necessary to maintain that power, even if it involves killing children. It was just a very, very stark kind of realization.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, he sort of, I saw the same sort of thing, you know, where he starts to realize that, you know, all this abstract stuff that he's playing with, that he understands how to do so well, that he's brushing up against the reality of that place for that in the world, and the consequences that has. And you know, this takes me back to a previous conversation that we had in one of our other sessions about, you know, knowing how to do the technical things is really important, and that's part of education in general. It's like, okay, you learn skills, you learn how to do things, and that is important. But I think what we're talking about here is that he's coming up against, well, this is the whys. You know, what's the significance of this? Why would I do this versus that? You know, how do I apply these skills, and what, you know, to what ends and to what consequences? So that, I think it's, you know, he's really kind of coming up against that part of the education now, and understanding, wow, all these abstract things that I've learned as an economist, this is, you know, these are the things that, you know, that abstract work that I do is touching upon, you know, that's really having real effects on real people in real lives.
Yeah, really great points, guys. Thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, Chris, next. Thank you. So I really did like all three of the main characters, but I say the one that got probably the most time in the book was probably Wei Dong / Leonard, all the way from San Francisco. Oh my goodness, he has been on quite a journey. From the start of being some late-night gamer to dropping out of high school and then running away. But between the dropping out of high school and running away, he was in a car crash. So I gotta say, it takes some guts to meander over to some convenience store and then hop on a bus and then go and plan your future. I mean, he wasn't expecting to go back. He was like, I'm leaving. I'm done with this. I have other important things to do. So he really hobbling his way forward and continuing to go. I really have to give him points for that. So, but he knows our friends Matthew. Matthew's the guild leader for the Shenzhen, China guild that they're working in. And, you know, he's finding more value. He's finding more usable skills of working with them than he was finding at school. He was very bored with school, and he was putting more time into doing the game, working with his guild and communicating. For heaven's sakes, he pretty much like learned conversational Chinese just so he could play with them. I mean, that takes real dedication, and yes, life hacking. Very true, Jerry. And he really put his foot forward in that. But I mean, sure, he takes a couple of weeks. He gets a job as a mechanical Turk in the Chinatown / San Francisco, and he's living in like a very small apartment, but he's still doing his job being a mechanical Turk. If you don't remember what a mechanical Turk is, it is a person who takes on an NPC, a non-player character within the game, and is typing out responses to the players so that they're more genuine. And the game company, some of the game companies felt that was a better experience than just having text block and scripting for their players. So he gets a phone after he gets the phone. Oh wait, after he calls Lou trying to find out what's happening. Lou just got out of that strike. he didn't get caught by the police, but Matthew did. But he's at the train station. He's wondering what he's doing, and he gets a call from Leonard, and he's like, "What's going on, man? Are you guys okay?" And he's like, "Nah, I need to work things out. I'm dazed and confused. Call me back in a bit." And then Lou gets picked up by G, and they have wonderful adventures on Radioland. But right after that phone call, Leonard's trying to figure out what's going on, but then he's been ignoring the phone calls from his mom, but he gets an email, and he's like, fine, I'll read this one. And it's a very urgent email saying, you need to call me now, something's wrong with your father. And he's not doing too good. He's something about his heart, I believe. That's the easy way to kill people off. But for Leonard, I mean, this was his lifeblood, his father, and I mean, he hasn't said anything nice to him in quite some time. I mean, he left him in a car accident, and he was yelling at him, and that doesn't sit too well with anybody. So Weidong/Leonard goes there, goes home, and he tries to figure out what's happening, and his mom's just at the table, distraught, and telling him that his father left. His father is on the other side of the light. Very not explicit detail, but you get the idea. And I mean, this is his. I would admit saying his first chance of experiencing someone's death. So, especially someone close to him. So he knew this person. He will never see them again. Lots of thoughts are going through his mind. But also the fact that now that his father's gone, it was his father's/grandfather's company of that shipping business. So now the mother is taking that on. And soon Leonard will have to probably take it. But he's like, but I have to deal with what's happening with my friends. This is important that I have to go do this. So Leonard comes up with the scheme of, I am going to go backpacking through America up to Canada. And the mom's in complete la la land. She's like, I'm busy dealing with this. If you need to go, fine. Just call me once in a while. And so Leonard, being the very industrious person he is, he takes a shipping container and he makes it livable for 3 weeks? Yeah. I would believe, yeah. Something like, no. Oh, God, no, not 3 weeks. 7 days, yeah. Like, I can't remember the amount of time, but he really decks out this shipping container so that he can live in it, so that he has his basic amenities. He has water, he has eating food, he has a sleeping area, he has internet, and yes, I included internet in the things that he needed. So he's ready to go. He has boxes of these game codes so that the Webleys can be on the US servers. He's ready to go join the fight. He's like, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm coming to you guys. And so he makes it over there. He makes it to a China port, and he sneaks in, and he's helping the Webleys, doing as much as he can. He gets an introduction into gold farming. He does it a bit. It's kind of fun. It's better than mechanical tricking, he says in one of the lines. And so then he's acting as this illegal immigrant. So even though he has papers, they're not papers that are going to stand up anywhere because he snuck into the country. They're not stamped at all. They're just papers. And now he's gotten forged papers thanks to G. And so he really is an illegal immigrant in China. He's this really like white person among all these Chinese people. G, while they're running away, is saying, gosh, I can't believe you're white. You stand out like a sore thumb. You have to stand back. When we're running away, you can't stand next to me. And I found that slight humorous as that happened, but he's always going to get stared at because he's an illegal immigrant. And sometimes some of his ways to not stay in the crowd is he takes a tourist map and he looks at it, and that's more common than him walking around. And especially him speaking Chinese, too. People, when he speaks Chinese to some of the people, they're surprised, like, you speak Chinese? This has happened multiple times. So, because he's taught himself this, he's very good at the conversational Chinese. So, I mean, it really came in handy a couple of times. But what this really leads me to be is Wei Dong is the person that is called upon to talk with Prickle, the head economist at Coca-Cola Games, and there wasn't a real decision factor. It just happened. But Leonard's like is sweating. He's like, I don't know if I can do this, and he's like, I have to do this. I have to do this. Let's do this. He went one-on-one with the Mighty Krang. They did simulations about what might happen, what they might say. But I mean, he really turned out to be this great communicator. He was tying people together. He was really making the statements very clear about what they wanted. And even though I have Survivor of 42 on Matthew, Leonard is also a survivor of 42, but he witnessed the death of his friend Lou / Tank. He was shot, and Leonard and G are dealing with that. And there's this really poignant chapter where she's trying to do a radio show, and she's saying, like, they killed him, they shot him, I loved him, and I was like, why? Why did that happen? Because even in one of the statements that Lou provided, he was talking with Leonard, and he was saying that he did love her, but he couldn't say it. And so the fact that he died, I was like, oh, you kidding me? Why would you do this? So it was a very upsetting moment, but I mean, it gave G a very strong initiative to put where yeah, sorry, I should have said spoiler, but I mean, this is the wrap up, so oh well, I mean, we'll get to it. I have more to go on, but we'll get to that. I'm sorry, man, you had to find out that way.
That's okay. That's what I get for falling behind.
So, I mean, they had a really good story. It really pushed G to a better. It helped her stand her ground better, because she was just, oh, I'm a factory. I talked to the factory, all the female factory workers. I'm all about good causes, but then it really hit her about what the cause was, because she was like, in one moment, she wants to like leave all this behind. Like, I should just go back home to my village. I should just get married. I should just have kids, and be done with this. I'm tired of running around. And then Matthew and then Leonard in his best Chinese, really, they're being emotionally distraught at this point. He's trying to coax her into really pushing on with the show because it is important, and she needs to see that because she had forgotten and lost sight. So once again, him being that great communicator. So I mean, he had a very dynamic character development. And Trish was bringing out that, but in reality, she couldn't go back. And, you know, that probably is true. She probably couldn't go back. So much had changed her already. She probably wouldn't be very satisfied with living in a village. Not really. Yeah. Trish is reminding me that she was saying that she would probably start eating rat poison. And the book made the claim that China is the only country in the entire world where there is more suicides in females than there are all in males in China. So that was interesting. I didn't know that tidbit. Well, true. One-child policy. But I digress. So on to the next one, unless someone wants to say something about Leonard. Or I think we're kind of pushing time, and I have more slides, so I promise we'll get to more talking, okay? Please moving on to Ashok and Yasmin. I know these aren't the main characters, but they bring a really good point as to what's happening. Both of these two characters are very resolved with their feelings, with their emotions. That's how they are presented. They aren't really outright about opinions, but as the story progresses, they're being more forward, they're being more outspoken, and this is the change that they're trying to emulate in the story, is that even though gold farming is this job that's like, oh, only 50 cents an hour and everybody does it. If you don't want the job, someone else wants it. But it's these really poor working conditions, how they treat their workers. It's really telling people that being silent is not the way to do things. You have to take a stand, you have to take a place, and you have to really take action. Whether you're doing a protest, whether you're talking to your boss, I mean, you really have to say that, voice an opinion and say that something is wrong. But both of these two characters had very good moments throughout the entire book. But I mean, you could see the development going from these very timid, like, I listen to commands, to learning new things, having these experiences change them. That's what makes a dynamic character, is when you have the events in the book affect your characters, especially people that aren't the three main characters. So, on to the next slide. So really, super spoiler alert. Jerry, you can hold your ears if you want to. I just wanted to really take a moment to recognize the sacrifices that were made and the people that die every day just because they wanted to be treated fairly. This happens every day all over the world. And even though these are fictitious people, it's more the symbology of this is happening. It's not something that you can just turn a blind eye to or be ignorant to. Things like this are happening. So definitely for Big Sister Nor with her going out in flames, for Lou being the true tank and taking bullet shots for everybody. Ping was shot and dragged more like a dog. The small boy who died from the stone to the head. The other 42, and there were many other people whose lives were taken that were not given names, but you could really get the picture of what was going on. So, yes. Next slide, please. So, okay, this is the awesome slide where everybody can talk in. I'm looking for you, Trish. So we're drawing conclusions. We're talking about the ending, what kind of conclusions and assumptions that we can make. I know that I'm going to start this off that I'm really curious as to what could happen with the meeting with Prickwell and the fact that they were in India by the Taj Mahal and the guy that they were trying to make a deal with came to them. And I don't feel like he brought people with him. He just came by himself. So I'll let it at you guys. What exactly do you think might be happening? What can we assume? What do you think, Trish?
Well, that was the thing that really kind of disappointed me about the ending, is that I really didn't feel like he gave us any conclusions. And that's my personal preference. I like for things to have a bit of a conclusion, because life is unknowing enough in itself, and I like for my books to be a little bit more finite in that they give me an ending. It may not be a happy ending, but at least it's a conclusion that you kind of can say, okay, they solved that problem, and move on from there. All I know at this point is that Coke has sent Connor to meet with the kids that get to India. Well, now you've got...
Well, I don't know if we know if Coke sent him.
Oh, well...
We don't know that.
That's true. See, there's another thing we don't know. So now you've got, in India, where the people, the culture, all kind of look similar with the same skin tone and stuff. Now you've got a sack of Chinese people, and two American guys, and is Leonard going to go home to his mom? I'm thinking he's getting pretty stinking homesick by this point, because I think she helped them get to India by contacting the company because they were having such a hard time getting out of China. But I'm hoping he goes home, because he's still 17. And, you know, we tend to, when we read a book and we read characters, I don't know if others do it, but sometimes you tend to kind of color them as an adult. And in this case, even though these kids are doing very adult things, they're still kids. And what's going to happen to them all? I mean, do people just go back to the way they were before all these things happened, or where do they go from here?
Right. No, I'm very curious. I if this was being opened up for a sequel, but it's been 14 years since Cory Doctorow published this book, so the chance of a sequel is fairly slim. And I was looking for for a sequel like description of the characters from Cory Doctorow himself, but he hasn't said anything in specifics to this book. So that was kind of disappointing for me. I was really looking for that, but I really hope Mala's okay. I mean, she's in a hospital in India. At least Ashok and Yasmin have found her. They've located her, and at least they're keeping tabs on her, I'm assuming. And that's where they go meet up with the other people, the remainder of the 5 that are left. And I mean, they introduced 2 new characters that I'm not even sure who they are, but they brought with him. I believe one of them is like Wing, and the other one is some other really weird name, and I don't know who these people are. So I mean, like, they bring a good. It's not Ping. Ping died, Chris. They have it on his cell phone. They got Ping. It's not Ping. So I mean, like, they really could open it up to a new sequel book. Because of the way the book is distributed with the whole Creative Commons culture. I mean, if one of us wants to write a sequel, you are probably more than welcome to. I mean, you could send it to Cory Doctorow and like, I was very upset by your ending. I wrote my own. How do you like it?
And I really like that about the book. It was something that, you know, we knew about a little bit, but then once we started looking at all the different versions and how you could pull it up on Kindle, and oh, if you wanted PDF, you could do that. Oh, you can read it on your phone. Oh, you can buy the hardback or the soft cover. I really like that, and I guess I liked what we did with the book, and I wouldn't mind us even I know this sounds bad, considering some lesson plans that might go around this, maybe to help some other people be able to use this book.
Oh yeah, we could pull some resources and really have a nice course going.
Yeah, but not a MOOC, okay?
All right.
I'm just saying a couple, just a couple quick things, you know. So if somebody wanted to use it, you know, for a library book club, or if they wanted to use it, you know, supposing they have an MMO after school club, or if they want to use it in their class, I think that this book has lots of possibilities.
Yes, I mean, rating-wise, I mean, people died in Harry Potter, but they were teaching that in schools too. So I mean, by all means, this book could totally be available to people to read for sure. Definitely high school at least. I don't know. Well, probably middle school might, you know. I don't know if they're mature, but you know, high school people could get it. I'd rather them read this than I love Shakespeare. God bless him in the grave, but he's, you know, the kids just don't like him anymore. And I had to study him, and I like him. But I can't force what I like onto others. It doesn't work that way. But in any case, let's see.
Well, there's also the whole there's also the bit about Big Sister Noor, who that whole thing. Prepare yourself, Jerry. The fact that she died herself. I mean, he seemed to just be like killing people off there at the end of the book in a pretty chop way, and once again, she was the guiding force behind the Webleys, and were the Mighty Krang and Just Bob, were they going to be able to continue that? Were the kids who came from China going to be part of that? Was Ashok going to be part of that? I mean, it once again, you see all the sacrifices the workers or the gold farmers, the Webleys. You see the ultimate sacrifices that were made, just trying to stand up for themselves, and you're wondering what happens here. You don't go back to WoW, or you don't go back to Mecha Warriors and Zombie Mecha and just start playing the game again, because too much has passed. And so you've built them up to this apex. Now where do they go?
Mhm. And true, killing off the main leader. I mean, I know she said her quote, "You must lead yourselves," and I mean that's very poignant. Like she has her like last words to Mighty Crane, like "You go," and like no, you're the leader, you must go first. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm a figurehead. I'm this I'm a radio person, but I mean anybody could take my place. I'm a switchboard, is what she says. I think that is definitely quoted. I am a switchboard. So I mean anyone can take that position. So I'm really curious as who will take that position and the direction of the Webleys and which way they will go. So I mean lots of open-ended questions that were not answered that I wish were answered. So let's see. Anyone else? Or look, we're ready to move. Okay. So on to the next slide, please. So future scope. Now I'm this one is going to be a very loose novel comparison between then and now. Go next. So right off the bat, the real difference. A novel was published in 2010. That was 4 years ago. Lots have changed in 4 years. I mean, we were like just getting used to Facebook. Google Plus is not even invented yet. Google Hangouts is not here yet. So, but we're in the year of 2014. So, novels stating that technologies are being more worldwide, they're being more spread out, people have more access, and you know what? That's still true today. Technology is continuing to expand. Mobile phones are making the rise. Or I mean, I should say smartphones. I mean, they do more than call people. Oh yes. So with the novel, it states that there was IWWW. I really can't remember what that stands for. I really should know, but you know, online workers union, basically uniting all the people who work online for very low wages. They wanted better living conditions. I mean, you know, the union stuff. But really, I did some very intense searching for something even close, even very close. I couldn't find anything that was in this realm of online workers, with the exception of Online Bankers Union, which was nothing that had to do with gold farmers at all. So that was distressing for me. So, I mean, this is why this is young adult fiction, even though it's based in a very modern, real life setting, and it was that like that short fast forward, like 15 minutes in the future, I think somebody said. Like, this is something that could be happening now in an alternate timeline, maybe. Because we have all the necessary things there, but where is this union that the gold farmers need? So, the novel was stating how most of the gold farmers are in Asia. It's still pretty much true, but there are shifts into esports. So, Louise and I have that bullet there. I believe in week 4, I brought up esports again. We were talking about Twitch TV and how Major League Gaming was becoming a real moneymaker for people. So, please go to the next one. So remember, week 4, I showed this infographic. It was talking about esports and the viewers, but also it says like what cash prizes are for winning. So just for this world championship, I mean, over $2 million. In terms of Asia, that $2 million is over 12 million in Chinese yuan. I mean, that's a lot of money. A lot of money. It's over buckets. I'd probably say truckloads of money. But I mean, could they really say that gold farming is that in comparison to I only have to have a team of 5 people? They have to be very good at what they're doing, but they have to work together to complete the tasks and win and be the best. I mean,
here's what I would say. Look, when it comes to something like this, and we'll post some things in the community, because what Chris and me and Grid found this physiology video that's really good about the difference between pro gamers and what they call Joe gamers, and the physiology of it, which is kind of cool. But the thing about it is, think about these gold farmers. What if rather than farming gold, they were working towards being a competitive team that instead could go for this kind of money, and there is a lot of good competition, or some other legitimate things. People now are getting paid to play video games and live stream them. I mean, while there's maybe not something unionized, there are some careers, or ways to make a living playing video games that are happening. And these gold farmers, we really don't know how good they are, and they could be phenomenal. We just don't know that their working conditions are just about get this thing, do this repetitively under bad, stressful working conditions, and who knows, maybe they could be great esports players, gamers.
Oh, very true. But I mean, like I one of the really strong comparisons that's not on this infographic, but I was doing research. So the American teams within North America, there's only 8 teams, or 8 major teams that are in competition. There are smaller teams, but these are the 8 ones that do the nationals and that go to World. For the Asia teams, there's over 20 Asia teams. So I mean, I know like a population difference might be in effect here, but I mean, those are really big numbers. And the difference of really competitive pro gaming teams for different games. Like, I mean, it's over twice what kind of teams exist. If that makes sense. I have Trish doing some eyeballs, and I don't think she. No.
No, I'm thinking. I'm just thinking.
Okay.
I'm just wondering. I'm also, Kay mentioned the physiology, and I'm just wondering, what does this do to, like, physically over time? I mean, they talk about, and I guess this is something that's going to have to be considered. I mean, I've heard of kids getting gamer's thumb from using controllers too much. Mm-hmm. But even in this sense, if you have, you hear about in suburbs and stuff about people who have their kids start playing sports, a particular sport, mm-hmm. at a very young age, like baseball. And by the time the kid is 16 years old, they're blowing out their shoulders and elbows because of repetitive motion injuries. Mm-hmm. So to someone, if a kid is spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day playing video games for weeks, months, years at a time, what is the negative of that? What does that do to hands, arms, shoulders, necks, etc.?
Oh, and the physiology thing, it didn't even go. What it went into was actually someone testing stress levels that happen when you're playing games. So that's the one we looked at. Oh, and it was really nice in the sense that it had the different pro players, and some of them, their heart rate would, some of them, their heart rate had to get going for them to play the way they did, while others played cool and calm. And that's what you often hear about athletes. There's some athletes who, fight better mad, boxers who fight better, like if they feel stress, and actually we were watching the video to talk about how our guild does it best. And talking about how does our guild, take down bosses or go into raids. What attitude works best for us? And we're not a laissez-faire kind of, like relaxed. We do better when we're not relaxed, and so that's really why we were following up on this. But I mean, I didn't see anything on the studies about what could be being done, like maybe the shoulders or the arms or anything like that.
Oh, definitely add that link on the description. I'd definitely like to look at that. But I think that was my closing statement for the time being. So on to the economics, virtual economies.
All right. So we're going to kick off with the, as we always talk about, the metagame. So I'm actually going to hand it back over to Kay.
Okay, this was just a general segue, and basically all we wanted to say about this was we're going to be considering this more as we consider more book clubs. So, Chris, I'm going to give it back to you.
All right. So, one of the big things that this book introduces to a lot of people, and one of the reasons why I really like this book, is because it really introduces the idea of virtual goods. So the idea that there are pieces, there are goods, there are services, there's things that are out there that aren't necessarily physical. These are things that you're seeing that exist only in a virtual space. So obviously the big thing in this book that you're introduced right away is what, guys?
Gold.
Yep, game gold. Virtual gold. So these are the type of things that's out there. But you also have fashion, weapons. There's different things out there that would all be virtual goods that people are purchasing and people are seeing monetary value to. The other big themes that we got were Ponzi schemes, derivatives. You read a lot about in the book about the greater fool theory and herd mentality. They are very much disguised as you read through the book. Also, he did Dr. O did a really good job of introducing people to the very complex and confusing world of monetary policy and currency exchange. I mean, these are some things that are out there that have that take people years to figure out. But he's did a really good job of presenting it in a very readable fashion. So for the Ponzi schemes, you guys we've talked about this at length the last couple of weeks. Really, the basic idea for the Ponzi scheme was to get the brokers in. So you guys noticed they roped in the brokers first. And then once they got the brokers then went out to their best clients, and then they gained momentum. And of course, like all schemes, eventually all good things must come to an end, and including some all bad things must come to an end as well. Is basically they went ahead and they crashed once they got too many investors. So they weren't getting enough new investors to pay off the old ones. The derivatives in this case, where we all got exposed to derivatives, was all of the bonds and the paper that they were deriving during the scheme that came off of the game gold. The idea is that everything they were doing was based off of something going on in the game. So they created their own bubble. Yes, Jerry just posted something in chat. Do you want to talk about that, Jerry?
Oh, well, you're mentioning kind of the sort of the herd mentality or the greater fool theory. And as I mentioned before, I'm a little bit behind in the reading, so I had just read the section where Connor's asset broker calls him up and basically pushes his buttons to convince him, talk him into making the big bet,
yep.
Right? And Connor even acknowledges this, that he's struggling. There's the logical side, Connor, which knows better, and then the other side, which really wants the big win. And I was just thinking that even though we're talking about the herd, it all starts off with that little bit of panic, of missing out, and just saying in chat that I'm watching him get led back into that lab experiment again. Where he knows how that ends up, and he knows how he ends up feeling about that, and there's a part of him that doesn't care for it, and at the same time, here he goes again.
Well, exactly, and that's the other overwhelming theme: was the Gorgon Gecko greed is good. There's a lot of greed. That was there, and apparently Google approved because it decided to do a disclaimer there when I was talking about greed. So the thing about it is that the other interesting thing that sort of made their scheme work was they targeted the 3 largest economies that were all owned by the same company. So I mean that really made the story work because that's actually believable. You're like going, okay, well if it was three of the largest economies that were there, they're all owned by one company, Coca-Cola, then you only had to negotiate with one player, and so that made them the most likely target. And basically all they did is they over-leveraged their derivatives. In other words, they borrowed against them, so they made derivatives on top of derivatives on top of derivatives, because you can always make more derivatives than there is underlying asset or value. Because after all a derivative is its value is derived from the underlying good. And so they were able to layer all that together. Again, it worked because they had all those gold farmers gathering all the gold. The game gold actually was perceived as having value, so the virtual good was there. Obviously, greed was there as well. And then there also was that interesting switch they had there, the idea that there was minimal risk or no risk. So, there's always those wonderful things. And I will tell you now, as a public service announcement, if anyone ever tells you something has low to no risk, that's red flag.
Well, the thing that I caught in that was, and it's something that I hear my husband say too when people are having these ideas, is that, or my kids say, "Oh, Dad, look what I just heard about," and he says, "If it sounds too good to be true, it is."
Yep.
And Connor even said that. He thought that while his broker was going through this spiel. He was saying, "Oh, this is too good to be true," so there it is. But what did he end up doing? He got pulled back into the lab experiment again.
Oh, and yes, and he went big too as well. So invoking margin calls, as long as other things as well.
It reminds me of that moment in the book when Ashlock talks about, and the smarter and more powerful the player is, the more susceptible. And in that same section of the book, Connor's talking about how he's behind the scenes and he has the power to influence what's going to happen with these bets that he makes, right? The investments that he makes. So he feels safer in some ways. That lulls him into this false sense of security that overrides his common sense or his intuition that something else is going on, because he feels like, well, I'm a power player. I have control over this. So yes, it feels ends up feeling safer to him because he has that privileged position.
Well, exactly, and it was interesting how what's interesting to me is that that they did a really good job of setting up and giving you. I mean, by the time it happened, you knew what was happening. It wasn't like all of a sudden out of the blue it was there. The reader was really sort of brought along very well. And Jerry, as you complete the book, you'll notice that they really throw portfolio theory out the window. There's no such thing as diversification. So there's some different things that are there. So the other thing I have is anything that happens between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., any decisions made during that time usually aren't good ones.
And I was just going to put out, and Trish posted this already about the Diablo auction house. So if you remember in the book where Connor's going, where Connor, left the company thinking he was going to get fired and maybe sued, or I even think he even mused over whether he had done something criminally. But remember, what really was happening besides the financial disaster was he had a program that was just pulling information and just stopping people from being able to go in because of all the information he was pulling and all the people that he was kicking out, as suspected strike people, and you just like how everyone was so upset about it because he was destroying the game, right? Well, Diablo opened up its own auction house, okay, that also allowed you to use real money. They opened it up in 2012. By March 2014, they closed it. And they started talking in mid 2013 that they were closing it. So I mean, they brought in an auction house that brought in real money that allowed people to really make the game about buying and selling epic items and things like that, which is a game that a few of us here in the Google Hangout play anyway. A mini game inside of WoW that we play all the time. But the thing about it is, what Blizzard, the company, had to do with Diablo 3 is close down their auction house. So it's nice to see that how the economic impact can happen to a game to the point that they take out an ability for players to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I wasn't really into Diablo at that time. Do you remember kind of the basic reason why they decided to give up on that experiment of?
Oh yeah, they and what Trish put up there is really nice because it also has some of the interviews and things like that. And the game developers said it was taking away from gameplay. That the basic premise of the game, and I can probably quote them directly, is to kill monsters and get cool loot, and that it was instead pursuing pursuing money, pursuing buying and selling was taking away from the gameplay. That was the rationale for taking it out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, how's that any different than like a freemium game, right? Where you get players in because it's free to play, but in order to advance and get the really sweet loot or the really cool gear, you pay. Or you can pay as opposed to doing the grind, right? Working. So I'm wondering how that. There are games out there like that, and I'm assuming they continue because the gameplay isn't being expected. But
it's not about the gameplay; it's about the business model.
Right.
Think about the freemium business model is we are going to make money because we're going to charge you to get the cool things.
Exactly.
Versus, yeah, go ahead, Trish.
Guild Wars, like Guild Wars, right?
Yeah,
you have to pay that way. But this is not Blizzard's business model because they're one of the biggest ones who are against gold farming. And it's in their right to use legalese and everything. So I think this was them dipping their toe in that and discovered very quickly that it pulled people away from the thing that I think Blizzard is most proud of in their business model, in their worlds, is the gameplay. Because I think they really believe in just seeing the hoo-ha of the intro of the Warlords of Draenor expansion. They are very invested in making their gameplay so challenging and so engrossing that you want to do it for the game, not to just have more stuff, I guess. But then again, I'm not a real business person.
Well, I go with the business model and who's making the money. Like Clash of Clans is a good example of where you have to spend money to get to get higher levels and get things like that. So again, that's the freemium model. While when Diablo was doing this was kind of an off to the side. Let's make have this improve the game rather than let's produce revenue. Now the boost, the level 90 boost that Blizzard has done in World of Warcraft, where you can buy a character and boost it to 90, I consider that that goes back to World of Warcraft. That for me, that's World of Warcraft saying, look, we understand that in two ways. One, that people might be selling tunes, and this is where we can make money. And on the second side, I think we can bring people in who aren't willing to invest level 1 through 89 to get to 90, and I think we can get them back into the game. So for me, while we might have hated the boosties showing up in the looking for raids month after month, as a business model, it may have been successful for Blizzard.
And I mean, other different like freemium models. I mean, lots of mobile games follow that suit. Lots of MOBAs, League of Legends, Dota. I can't remember the other one. The DC Universe, Marvel Heroes, like you're paying for different expansions to come out. Even though the initial game is free, you pay for different expansions. You have access to different powers, to different classes, to different characters, to different skins. Some of it is cosmetic, and then some of it is beneficial to the gameplay. Like, instead of having a priest be the hero, you have another healer, which doesn't take mana, but is still a healer role. But I mean, you could still play as a healer as a priest. So I mean, it's doing the trade-offs. Like, would you pay money for this? What are you willing to do as a consumer?
No, very good thoughts with that. I mean, that's one of the things that everyone's playing around with is, games are looking at how do I go ahead and get more and more players to come in, and they're trying to balance that. And also, in the book as well, they talk about, you have to make sure there's still fun in the game. because fun is the underlying value. At least as one of the different theories there floated by Doctorow is that fun has value, and it's also tied to the confidence of the game. So if the game is fun, therefore there's a high confidence in the game. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the greater fool theory, the idea is that value is not tied to actual money, but it's tied to expectations of future value. And so we talked about this sometimes. I think in week 2 we talked a little bit about it, and Jerry actually talked about greater fool theory, whereas there's always be someone else willing to pay more than you did. And the problem, of course, is that sometimes that doesn't happen. And if you're the last one in on the greater fool theory, then guess what that makes you? It makes you the greatest fool of them all. But and we all know what happens to fools and money. But basically, that's what the greater fool theory comes from. The idea is that there's always going to be someone else, that you buy something with the specific idea that someone else is going to come along later and is going to pay more for it than what you did. Yes, the famous tulip reference. Yes. Tulip futures. Oh no. Herd and mob mentality. The idea is that people will act as their peers do. So Lemmings is a great example. The thing is the idea that if you push influencers in a certain direction, a larger group will follow. And what's interesting from the herd mentality, the mob mentality, is it's used a lot. I mean, a lot of people use it in marketing. We call this roach baiting. And what roach baiting is this: we find a new technology, and we go into middle school or high school, and we identify who the cool kids are. And what we do is we invite them to a focus group. We let them play with the toy, the new electronics, and then we send them home with it. And guess what happens? They take the new device to their school. They show it to their friends. And yes, everyone else wants it. So then, little by little, they all creep back to the bait, and they all have to get the new product or the phone or whatever. And they bring it back, and over and over and over again until eventually you get a bunch of people buying. Yes, shoes. But those are the ideas that are there. So the idea of the herd mob mentality is something we're all familiar with. The idea that people will act as their peers. Doctorow takes it from the standpoint of greed and envy. The idea is that you're going to be jealous of somebody else, so you'll want to be able to do what they're doing because you're jealous of what status or what returns they're getting. Yes, the evils of Webkins. No. we have people now throwing out all of the different mob mentalities. Like Tamagotchis, we have Webkins, we have Beanie Babies, apparently shoes. They were So there's lots of things that are out there. Yes, Furbies, yes. Elmos, Talking Elmos was a while ago too as well. So these are all things that people have to have. So the other thing he did, I talked about a little bit earlier, is he did a really good job of introducing people to the complicated topics that revolve around the monetary policy. And the other thing is you'll see on my screen share, you'll see that actually if you guys go back to the site, if you click on the virtual resources that are the virtual economics resources that's there on the page on the Google site, you'll see we listed a lot of our videos and a lot of our additional resources for this. So this is always a great place for you guys to go back and check out if you guys are interested in more things to hop down to. The other thing about monetary policy is that he did a really good job of setting it up so that way if you found monetary policy interesting, there are a lot of rabbit holes you could follow along. You go do a lot of research. There's a ton of economic data out of here. I mean, everyone likes the Kosei cost, the idea of there's a cost for acting as a group. The bigger the group, the bigger the cost. So there's a lot of things that are out there. It also does a really good job of introducing everyone to virtual goods and virtual currencies, because there's something going on. We're going ahead and we talked about it a lot in our community, and that was
Bitcoin.
Bitcoins, yes, everyone's favorite. It's a fun and a wonderful toy.
Collect them all.
Yes, collect them all. Bitcoin hoard. Bitcoin is classified as a cryptocurrency. The idea is that it's based off a mathematical formula, and that's how this math is what sort of protects it from being exploited or from being copied, from being counterfeited. So the idea is that each transaction has a key. So each Bitcoin has a unique key, and what happens is that third parties, which are known as miners. So yes, it's kind of like Minecraft, but no, what it is third parties. They're called Bitcoin miners, and what they do is they rig up their little computers and little machines, and they use the key to solve a series of problems. And the first miner to solve the problem approves the transaction. So the idea of the equivalent of that is like a notary of the public. Once you solve all of the math problems, you notarize that transaction. And so once one person solves it, and then what happens is a new number of transactions get started. The first miner solved the problem, approves the transaction. There's only an infinite number of ways. Actually, I should say there's only a finite number of ways to solve the problem. So that's the other interesting thing about it, is that the algorithm they're using, the cryptography that they're using to encrypt the bitcoins, is something that only has a finite number of ways to solve the problem. And so my question to everybody is, why would having a finite number of solutions, why would that be a good thing?
Well,
in terms of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's trying. I read an article once that said that that speculated that Satoshi, whoever he is, was essentially trying to digitally recreate gold.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, right? Mm-hmm. And behind that being a good thing for currency is this assumption that while it wouldn't work, currencies don't work unless they're finite. You have to have a medium of exchange that is naturally scarce, and that scarcity intrinsically makes the whole thing make sense and makes it all work. So part of sort of buying into the argument of Bitcoin, you have to assume that makes sense, that something being scarce is what makes a currency work.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're definitely right along the same lines. Trish also is talking about it as well. She says it's so that way someone can't just run out and print additional money and cause inflation, and that's really what it is. The idea is if you only have a finite number of solutions, therefore you limit inflation. Is the idea behind it. Now, allegedly, the number that's floated out there mostly is the maximum amount of inflation that can come out of a Bitcoin is 21 million additional Bitcoins, which actually is not bad. And this is like over the next, like 40 to 80 years. So it's pretty long-term going what they're seeing, because they're assuming as it runs through the equation, and this is what it is, and this is and what it is, these additional Bitcoins are generated through the mining, which is the incentive for the Bitcoin miners, because the miners get to keep that. That's their Bitcoin. So that's the value generation to keep people creating these machines that do all the complex calculations. So it's interesting how they have this loop. The feedback loop is set up so that way, we need people to do the transaction and do the someone called it, really what you're doing is you're doing a very rudimentary very rudimentary attack on how to break an encryption model. It's really what these miners are doing. They're trying to solve the encryption problems, and they're doing it in a very non-efficient way. It's very much doing trying to just to hammer it out. And what happens though is because they're doing it, they're doing it because what their goal is they hope to be the guy who notarizes the transaction that generates a new Bitcoin, because then they get to keep that Bitcoin. The miner does. And so what happens is that's that continuous loop. So the miner goes, I want to get the extra Bitcoins, so what do? Well, I plug it back in and I try to do more mining. And so it just keeps sustaining that momentum. And by doing that, they're also enhancing the security of the currency. So these are some of the different things that are out there. Yeah, and Jerry just posted something, so feel free to talk.
Well, I think Bitcoins is a really interesting, very fascinating sort of kind of a current event that it has people talking about currencies and monies and things like that. And I think one of the interesting things about the discussion is obviously this is a technological innovation. It's very, very interesting, and there's a lot of uses for it, and it is very, very cool in that sense. I think though part of the potential problem when we're talking about, well, this program in the Bitcoins, it has these certain rules, and only this amount will be created, right, and no more, and so you can't generate more Bitcoins. And I think that's great if it all works if you assume that Bitcoins exist in a sort of a vacuum, right, in an alternate reality next to our own, but ultimately doesn't touch us. In which in a reality where people who do have access to money printing presses can't print up all the money that they want, go ahead and buy Bitcoins from anyone who's willing to sell them, right? So I don't think that in the real world application you end up escaping inflation if that's your real concern. If Bitcoins touch the real world. So do we imagine a world in which Bitcoin holders will not be willing to trade them for dollars?
Well, exactly, and that's the other thing that they're looking at. And the other thing you have to think about, though, is remember, the purpose of the Bitcoin was to, monetarily get off the grid.
Right.
The idea is this week's resources, we really hit a lot on the idea of a gray economy, or System D economics. And so this is that informal economy. This is the fact that this is something that's going beyond the control of governments. You're not necessarily using a national currency. It's people who are, it's the equivalent. Like I said, it's the monetary equivalent of going off the grid. And the idea is that you're creating your own currency that is being traded with these Bitcoins. The idea is that part of the idea is that I don't think that whoever no one knows who really is, because the gentleman who it's attributed by it's a pseudonym. So nobody really knows who actually came up with the idea. So except for the guy who did, and he's not talking. He or she is not talking, I should say. And the thing is that what's interesting about the whole thing is that Bitcoins were developed to be outside the system, and the idea was this would be a truly national, or I should say, truly global currency. The idea is that it's being monitored. The central bank, the economics of Bitcoins is mathematical. It's all inherently a mathematical system. So that's the interesting thing, the piece about it. And Blue is saying aliens made it. So.
Well, I guess the other. I'm sorry.
Fine.
Well, I think the other thing about this too, when we're talking about, within the context of the book, we're talking about monies and currencies and theories of economics and how those things play out in real life and the impact that they have. I think another aspect of this too that's really interesting is that, with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, we seem to be focusing on, well, we just don't have the right money medium technology. It's a technology problem again, right? We touched upon this earlier. Well, it's a problem with the technology. We just need a more perfect medium of money than anything else that's come before, and certainly better than fiat, et cetera, et cetera. And then good things can happen, whatever that might be. Whatever the reason is to go off the grid, usually it's a good reason that people underline or highlight when they're advocating for this. And I don't know if that's good from the standpoint of, well, then we're attributing or imbuing the technology with a lot more power than it really has. And I think in a certain way it persuades us or encourages us to think that, well, it's in the power of the technology to make those changes and not in us, not in the user. And for me, when I think about this, and I think about, well, this is really cool technical development, but is it fundamentally a technological problem that we need to overcome? And I think about, well, we have other instances of other economies, other people making different decisions and structuring their rules differently that have come out with different outcomes in their economies, and they didn't have to invent a cryptocurrency to do it, right? So I think that there's argument. I think there's an argument to be advanced to say, well, I don't, that this may not be a technology problem inherently. If people can come out with different outcomes without having to come up with a new form of money, they're using fiat money just like everybody else. So, anyways, I think there's that aspect of it too.
What I was going to say is I don't. For our game-based learning grant, we purchased like some server space for Minecraft, and for this we were given the option, and this was a company out of the Netherlands that has a good reputation for keeping up Minecraft servers and just making your life, your part of it effortless, right? They're called Fluctus. Very nice company. But they allowed you to pay is you could either, you could pay credit card, you could pay PayPal, or you could pay in Bitcoins. So I thought that was very, and of course we didn't have Bitcoins, but I thought it was very interesting that I was starting to see services, at least technology ones that were international, willing to let you purchase with Bitcoins, which for me, I go, oh, what are they thinking? Because Bitcoins, and I don't think Chris has talked about this yet, but the price of Bitcoins can fluctuate greatly, and they really have. And we haven't mentioned Silk Road whatsoever, which was an illegal, well, it was a website that allowed you to purchase drugs. And it also allowed you to use Bitcoin to purchase those drugs. And yeah, the FBI shut it down, and the FBI is this big holder of Bitcoins because they raided it. And the thing of it is, Bitcoins, this company Fluctus was making a bet, on the value of Bitcoins when they decided to add that.
Well, a couple things that occur to me. First, Bitcoin, where the magic really happens in terms of making it useful as a currency is in the ledger, right? A lot of focus is on the mining piece of it. Well, this is what you need to mine, and this is how the algorithm is. But in terms of making it useful, you can mine on the Bitcoins you want, but until people can trade and there's a ledger, right, that documents those trades and whether or not that prevents a Bitcoin from being counterfeited or spent twice on the same, two different items, by the same person at the same moment, all that magic is in the ledger. And in a way, that's kind of a throwback to where money originally started, which was not some item that I give you and you give me and we assume a value. It was a ledger. It was just literally a ledger where it's like, okay, I'll put a mark in the ledger that represents this transaction or a series of marks, right? So it's kind of a throwback in a way to earlier forms of credit. Not credit in the way that we need today, but more kind of an early version of that. The other thing too, for me, also that example of things like Silk Road or gray or black market kinds of things. Again, for me, I look at that and go, well, again, the power is not in the tool in terms of the outcome; it's in the users. So Bitcoin, just like every other currency that we've played with up until this point, it isn't. I don't believe the tool is inherently positive or negative, that it's going to be a pro-social or anti-social outcome. I think a lot more is going to depend upon the users of that technology. So that's where I'm also, I'm very cautious about feeling like, okay, well, yeah, all we need is the perfect technological solution, and then all good things, then it's all good things will happen. I don't buy that at all. That's the part that scares me, is that people seem to be overwhelmingly feeling like, well, if we can just get this technological innovation off the road, that suddenly a better world will happen. And I'm thinking, well, there's no reason to believe that. There's no reason to believe that the rules of the game will change. We'll just get a more hyper, fluid, and efficient version of whatever it is that we're doing now, which is what the tool will allow us to do, is to be hyper efficient. So,
I think so, but I think there's also, and we posted a video about it, and this person did a TED Talk on it, but as far as I'm concerned, and did anybody ever read Hernando de Soto's The Mystery of Capital? It's a book, and it centers around South America and how you stay in poverty because you can't get credit. And one of our TED speakers does reference this, but I think there's a possibility for something like Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies that this can open up parts of the economy in developing nations that otherwise weren't accessible. And for me, yeah, you're right. I don't think it's inherently good. It could definitely go to things that weren't great on the society. But I also think I like that there's potential.
Oh, and again, I want to acknowledge that the technological innovation is exciting for those reasons that you said. That it makes it easier to do things that we couldn't do using the technology that we have now. And I think that's one of the most promising things is that, yes, it would allow us to reach into areas and have influence and have effect that wasn't economically feasible or possible before. On the other hand, whether or not I feel encouraged by that or I feel dread by that depends on who's doing the reaching, right? So things that I think many people would not want to have happen could happen more easily because the currency's off the again the Silk Road kind of example, right? I mean, so things like human slavery still exists today, right? And it continues to exist and does quite fine without cryptocurrencies. It might even become stronger with cryptocurrencies.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think I love the innovation piece. I'm not trying to knock the innovation. I fully acknowledge it. I think it's a really cool technological tool, but I think it's really important to step back and look at, okay, so here's a great new tool, and as opposed to assuming that it's going to bring about all the good things, to ask, well, what are we going to be doing with this?
Well, exactly. I just have up here on the website I pulled up. Here's a different types of cryptocurrencies that are out there. There's a lot of them. Bitcoin, Namecoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, Purecoin, Mastercoin. I'm waiting for Visa Coin. Since there's a Mastercoin.
Yeah.
So then you have some new ones out: Hashcoins, Omnicoins, Coino, Ron Paul coins. What if that's what if that's marketing? Betacoin, Next, Globe, Voltacoin, and there's some different ones that are out there. So there's a lot of different ones that are going out.
Dead and dying. Oh my.
Yeah, there's some that have been out there for a bit, and now they're going out of it. And those are the things you have. I mean, there's lots of different. People have been trying to come up with different currencies. I remember whenever I first went into Second Life, one of the then I went into OpenSim, and one of the first people I met in OpenSim was a gentleman who was trying to create a virtual currency for OpenSim, and the idea is that he was trying to become the first person to coin the currency, because there's money to be made, there's power to be made whenever you're the mint, whenever you're the person who can go ahead and manipulate cash flow. So and it was funny because OpenSim at the time, and I don't think they've ever got into a currency because I just sort of haven't been in OpenSim for a while. But at the time, there are three or four guys out there in OpenSim who are trying to compete to become the currency of OpenSim. How Second Life had Lindens. Well, they wanted to go ahead and create their own version of a virtual currency. So those are things that you're going ahead and seeing, is that there's always been an attempt to create a currency. And like I said, I mean, anybody could create a currency. I mean, you could have Jerry. Come on, you could have Jerry dollars. And
that's part of the point, though. When you went over that list, what jumped out at me is it seems to be attempts to create affinity groups.
Yeah.
And that's essentially it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a currency exchange within a smaller group, and
within a smaller.
And that's how Bitcoin started. I mean, now they're starting to get more attention.
Well, why don't we just say, look, I'll just decide to be much more selective about who I give my dollars to.
Well, exactly. Well, the thing is, we can just say, hey, we have Bucko Bucks.
Uh-huh.
we'll just call them buckos. How's that? We'll just call them buckos. So and you can denominate your buckos however you want them. And the thing is, you could go out and print your own currency, and you could attempt to go ahead and pay people with them. I mean, anybody can make a currency. The problem is there has to be an underlying value, because the currency, it's what we just talked about. Currency is a derivative. It's a derived value from the underlying asset. The U.S. dollar is a derivative of the value that the U.S. has in basically the global perspective of things when it comes to economic value. Same thing with any national currency is it's there. So I'd like I don't know how much 1,000 buckos would cost, but but you can set your exchange rate. It could be whatever denomination you want, because you're
well, okay, I'm being kind of like lame about this, but you take that same example.
Mm-hmm.
You could take the dollars that we play with now.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
We feel sort of disempowered by the government owns that, and other people control it, not us. And you can look at it a different way, saying, well, okay, I have a certain amount of dollars, and I can use them in a much more selective way, as I might with Bitcoins or these other cryptocurrencies. You can decide not to do business with other people, right? And again, I think that there is, not that I'm saying that dollars are inherently better or worse, but just that, the power to make these things happen, which I think that's the point of wrestling with cryptocurrencies. It's not the toy itself, but the outcome, because everyone's always going about, well, this is why this technological feature will lead to a better outcome. And I think, yes, that could happen. You could use it that way, but why don't you just use what we have now that way? Again, I don't think that the power is in the technology. If we want to be more decentralized, then let's be more decentralized. Let's begin to behave in a way that's more decentralized, that empowers through the use of these currencies the kinds of outcomes that we want in society, and not wait around until someone comes up with the perfect cryptocurrency so that we can do that. I think that's weird. I think that's fundamentally, again, I love the technology piece. The gadget of it is really cool, but I don't for a moment believe that no matter how perfect perfectly crafted the technological tool is, that you're going to guarantee good outcome, the kind of positive outcomes that people are really after, because if you're assuming that the power is in the technology to make that change and not in you. Well, I think people perceive the tool, and people ultimately create the outcomes through that tool, whether they're aware of that or not.
Well, yeah, but for the longest point in time, we've always had purchasing power. Is you can vote with your dollars. I mean, you can vote with whatever currency. I mean, quite honestly, if the world wanted to get rid of the U.S. dollar as a global currency, it's easy. They just exchange all their dollars for euros.
Something else, yeah.
Or another large batch of currency. And you see that. I mean, you've seen that in the last 10 years, where it's funny because I remember I was in my MBA program and we were just talking about the strength of the dollar, what's going on, and you hear it now about every other year, every 5 years or so. There's always a big discussion on the strength of the U.S. dollar, and we have too much debt. We have other, and what happens is whenever rock stars, whenever international entertainers start demanding payment in euros only, that tells you that the confidence in the U.S. dollar is not doing very well. So I mean, those are things that are out there. But that's the thing, is you've always had you always had the ability to vote. I mean, with your money. I mean, that's the idea behind the whole buy local campaigns. The idea is, well, why give your money to a very large corporation instead of just giving it back to buying from your local community, so the dollars stay in your community. That way the dollars don't get shipped off to, whether it's California, whether it's the East Coast, whether it's Bentonville, Arkansas, because that's where those big companies bank. They don't bank locally.
Bank. Exactly. And that's total throwback to the beginnings of capitalism, when you're talking about Adam Smith, right?
Yep.
what the kind of capitalism that he was talking about was a very kind of localized kind of empowerment, right? The economy being a way to empower the local community because there's natural checks and balances. And he saw at that time that if those checks and balances were removed, that bad things would likely happen. In other words, if you had investors who could reap a financial investment at no personal cost, in other words, I can make a decision where I financially gain, but there's no social or other costs to me. I don't have to live with that because I don't live next to you, or this, the mess isn't going to get dumped in my backyard. Then bad things start to happen, or there's the potential of bad things, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's where I see the whole eat local thing or buy local is kind of a return to acknowledging that, look, what we do with our money affects our general well-being as a local community, and being conscious of where those dollars go and whose roads they go to pay, to keep up, or whose schools they go to keep stocked, right, but with good books and with a good environment and well-paid teachers. All those things matter, and I think that it's kind of drawing people back to this, re-examining what we're doing and saying, okay, well, what's the point of this, right? And where's my power as a consumer to vote? Not just vote with my dollar, but also embody or empower making certain things a reality with my dollars.
Okay, well, I'm getting discussions about how long we're going on about this. So apparently other people might not find our economic and monetary discussions as entertaining as we do. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Kay, talk about what's next, and we're going to start wrapping it up.
Well, this was our wrap-up, so I'm talking about the next. Okay. Within the next couple days, we're going to have a survey out, basically asking you your opinions and your thoughts, and what exactly would you want in another book club, because we enjoyed it. So believe it or not, we're going to do it again. So please take the survey when we have it up. Okay. So we will be talking about a fall metagame book club. And I wanted to thank here Inevitable Betrayal, which is such a big part of this whole book club. We want to thank ISTE, Virtual Environments Network, and also the Games and Simulation Network. And that's all we have. This is our wrap-up. We are done with For the Win and basically 5 weeks of an intro to a doctoral level game studies course, right?
That's awesome.
So just wanted to say to everybody, yes, Warlords of Draenor is coming. If you want to get involved with our gaming guild, please do. Sherry keeps telling us she can't. We'll drag her in eventually. And we will be looking at how to do this again, sometimes fall/winter. We'll figure out when. But we really enjoyed it, and we want to thank everybody. So that's it, and goodbye.
Take care, guys. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Awesome people.